People who've appeared on dating shows, Naked Attraction, First Dates, what's it like behind the cameras? Story 1. Had a non-actor friend on MTV's Next in the early 00s as one of the 3 suitors on the bus. I watched the episode and the banter didn't sound like him at all. I asked and he said, every single word out of my mouth was scripted. We now have a Discord. Check out the server in the link in the description. Story 2. A friend of mine was on the Irish First Dates. She said everything took ages. They had to get there early and wait for hours to be called. They were told to take a toilet break during the date so they could be filmed phoning someone. This took a long time as they had to change microphones. Afterwards, they had to wait around to be filmed talking about the date. They were given €20 towards the next meal and had to pay the rest themselves. The taxi afterwards is just for filming purposes and drops them off around the corner. They have to make their own way home. Story 3. I did a car dating show when I was an actor in LA. It was a lot of fun and we did a lot of trivia games and such. After 2 hours, they took me aside and asked if I was in love with the girl. I honestly said that I wasn't, but I'd be happy to be friends. For a long time, I couldn't figure out why they wouldn't use my episode because I thought it was really funny. Turns out they only use the episodes where people actually fall in love with each other in 2 hours. That's a little fast for me. Well, hey, at least they asked. They didn't force OP to be like, okay, now you're in love with this person, go! Story 4. I don't speak Spanish fluently, but one time I appeared on 12 Hearts, which is a Spanish language romance show where a woman has to choose from 12 men to date, living in Southern California where it's filmed. And a Spanish-speaking friend of mine dragged me to the set when they had a last-minute cancellation and needed someone to stand in. Anyway, the gimmick of the show is that each of the 12 guys has a different zodiac sign. And I guess that's part of the host/matchmaker's recommendation to the woman. I didn't really understand what was going on, but they didn't care what my actual birthday was. They just told me to pretend to be a Sagittarius for the show. I made it to the second round. The woman didn't kick me off immediately, much to my surprise. When she asked me to describe myself, I kinda just said, you know, I'm a nice guy who likes having fun, or something ridiculous in my high school level Spanish. It was a silly but memorable experience. Wish I could find it on YouTube. It would have been 2005 or 2006. Story 5. I was an actor in the 90s/00s. Our agency supplied actors to dating shows. We had 3 people pretending to be in a love triangle, being sad and emotional and angry and whatever, and we watched a recording of it in our classes, including the 3 in question, laughing at the sheer, well, the falsehood of it all. It was basically improv. I actually didn't know until then that the contestants were faked. I guess real people do apply, so perhaps they use a mixture of real applicants and stooges to pad out other episodes. Story 6. Not me, but a mate went on dinner date. Had the date, and the producer said they'd call him in the next few days after the winner had been chosen by the girl, and they were ready to film the conclusion. They called him on a Friday night while we were in the pub, but they wouldn't tell him if he'd won and was going out, or if they would just be filming the rejection. He wanted to stay at the pub, but I convinced him to go back. Turns out he lost, and after 10 minutes of filming, spent the entire evening at home on his own. He was pretty annoyed. Yeah, that's one way to get genuine reactions, I guess. Just don't tell them what's gonna happen. Story 7. Good buddy of mine was on a bachelorette-style show. He was drunk most of the time. They used the lavalier mics to have PAs restock whiskey and replace kegs more than they used it to record actual audio for the show. It was interesting to see parts of his story being told as sweet and kind man, but as a good friend, I could just see the drunk on his face on a lot of his dates or interactions. He ended up winning. They also NDA'd him to hell, and he refused to talk about the show in any capacity until like a year or so after it aired. Story 8. So I've had the liberty of dating a girl, now an ex, who is on a dating show, and here's what I can relay from what I remember. 1. There are planted actors/actresses who act outrageously for added production drama in practically every show like this. 2. A large portion of fights/drama that happen are the cause of spread rumors from production to once again spice things up. 3. Lots of it is artificial. Even when the chemistry seems to go well between 2 people on these shows, they rarely end up together once it's over. Again, the biggest shock from her was how immensely planted most of these shows are. Is that something people are actually surprised by? People thought that people were really going on these shows and falling in love or whatever. It's TV, it's show business. It's gonna be treated like show business. Story 9. I worked on a season of a relatively popular dating show once, and there were some interesting moments that I thought were smart of the producers to do in order to make good television. But also I remember walking away from that show thinking to myself, none of this is technically wrong, but it leaves a bad taste in your mouth. A few things I remember. 1. Bachelorettes and bachelors could absolutely not meet each other under any circumstances before the cameras were rolling and ready. Security on this was practically tighter than for the president. It was so essential for the producers to capture the real, authentic first reaction that the bachelor had to seeing each bachelorette for the very first time. After that initial reaction, we'd shoot it again a few times to get different angles, but those reactions you see are real. 2. Every bachelorette was cast months in advance, because even though the show is about a bachelor, the characters who provided drama and story were the bachelorettes. They were picked out of literally thousands of auditions and chosen because they were all vibrant TV personalities with very strong beliefs that created possible conflicts to drive plot. The bachelor themselves was selected about 2 weeks before shooting because he has enough status to be believably desired. The one I remember most is we cast a bachelorette who was a single mom and kept it a secret for the entire show, until that big reveal moment for the bachelor himself, and used that as a big reveal for an episode. Personally, she was my favorite, most down-to-earth bachelorette, but the bachelor just didn't jive with it. 3. Producers never stopped trying to BS their way into getting free stuff for the show. Locations, product placements, free admittance to things for filming. They genuinely believe that just because we show a restaurant on TV, that people will flood it later because they saw it on whatever show. This goes for all reality TV, really. 4. Crews bet on everything. If it's a competition in any way, crews have money flying all around it. Only producers keep out of the betting rings. This goes for basically every reality show. 5. Surprisingly little is fabricated outright compared to what people think about reality TV in general, at least for bigger shows with large audiences. Most of what you see is real choices, decisions, and outcomes. The planning and manipulation people think happens comes all in pre-production, based on extensive interviews with contestants on things. As an extreme example, someone's afraid of heights? Congrats, your date is now bungee jumping and a glass floor restaurant dinner. It's always about eliciting strong reactions from vibrant people, which kind of leads to the last big pillar I learned across several shows. 6. The contestants don't matter. Nobody on the show actually ends up caring about the contestants because they are just the driver of the story. Everything is done for the audience watching at home. Story 10. I was at first dates in the Netherlands as a background date. You arrive at a large empty room with the rest of the background date people, and then you have to sign some stuff. I couldn't wear color or a print, that was too much of a distraction, and the attention should be on the real participants. We saw the participants in the same empty room, but we couldn't talk to them. Then we went to the restaurant, which was a small TV studio. It looks big on TV, but it really was small. There was no music at all because they had to edit the footage later. They told us to speak loudly. The food was good and the waiters were really nice. Story 11. I wasn't on a dating show, but I saw one being filmed. A few years ago, my wife set up a cool birthday party at an axe-throwing place in Atlanta. We had our reservation set up and showed up on time, but we weren't allowed inside because they were filming a show. Ready to Love or A Scene or something like that. Anyway, it was a young couple, probably in their late 20s, and it was very clear they were not on a real date. While we were waiting outside, they had to film them descending the steps several times because the couple wasn't showing enough affection. They also filmed them exiting the venue and walking away about 3 to 4 times. After they filmed them leaving, we were allowed to go inside. However, the production team still wasn't happy with the results, so the couple came back in to film a few more scenes. You could absolutely tell that these actors weren't into each other at all, as they had to film the girl throwing an axe about 10 times before she got a good shot. And when she finally got one, the dude wasn't even paying attention. So we had to wait for her to try another 5 to 6 times before she hit one and he ran up and gave her a kiss. It was super awkward to watch, and I cannot for the life of me believe anyone would think this was a real date. Pretty surreal experience, but I can guarantee that whichever show this was 100% scripted. Yeah, I'm not surprised it looks fake in person, because we don't see it in person. All it has to do is look real for TV. Story 12. So I wasn't on a show, but I really wanted to tell this story. I was one of the final, 20 in the selection for the first season of Beauty and the Geek Australia, but ultimately didn't make the final cast. My whole thing was that I was, still am, a rapper, but also a giant nerd. When we got into the final one-on-ones with the producers, they asked if I had any special skills, so I told them that yeah, I rap. I actually had a song that had a little radio play at the time called Sci-Fi Geek, so they asked me to perform it, which I did a cappella. Anyway, I didn't make the show because I don't think I was book smart enough. Like, most of the cast had multiple doctorates, which I was bummed about, but I got over it. Anyway, when it aired, I received multiple text messages saying I urgently had to watch it. The very first week, on the first frickin' episode, the challenge for the geeks was to write and perform a rap song for the beauties. They essentially distilled my whole pitch down to use for one episode. It felt like I'd been slightly wronged by that one. Story 13. This story's going to start off mundane, but it'll get interesting towards the end. I was on Naked Attraction, Season 2, Episode 10. I was volunteered by my friends and just kept on going along with it until I ended up at the studio. There's a lot to talk about. I'll start with the hiring process. So one day they just called me, asked a few questions, and said they wanted me to come to London for an audition. They advised I would have to get naked during the audition. I went to this small office and had a discussion, before being taken to a room with newspapers all over the glass walls. There was a man behind the camera and a woman ready to ask questions. They asked a few things whilst recording, then asked me to get naked. I obliged. So I was just chatting to them whilst nude. They then asked me to do a few things like a few cheesy poses because the higher-ups love that stuff. I think they asked me to do star jumps at one point. Anyway, the whole thing was weird, but not awkward. They then sent me on my way, and a little while later they confirmed my audition was successful. Normally they'd do a psych test in person, but as it was close to the filming date, we did the test over Skype. They basically wanted to assess whether or not I could handle scrutiny that I may receive for being on the show, and whether I'd crack under the pressure or blow my brains out. Anyway, they booked me a ticket and asked me to go to Manchester for filming. I got to a premiere inn and was asked to meet in the lounge in the morning where someone would collect me. There were a bunch of guys there and we were taken to the studio that wasn't far away. Fun fact, the studio is also used to record other programs such as Jeremy Kyle. Anyway, on the first day I was a reserve, so I was there to sit around and do nothing for hours in case someone bailed and they needed a replacement. We had runners who got us food and drinks, but we weren't allowed to leave the room, unless we were going to the toilet or for a cigarette. Even then, we had to be accompanied. There were more female runners than male runners, and it felt like some of the participants were trying to pull. Anyway, we got paid for the days we were not being filmed. It was £35 per day, I think. If you were filmed, you did not get paid. Second day, I was set to be on the show, as in one of the pods. I remember walking over and thinking, this girl has vague tastes, because I was with a guy who was old enough to be my dad, a very muscular guy, a ginger, a black guy, and some handsome guy. And then me. I didn't really fall into any category, I don't think. Anyway, we had to sit around a lot, just waiting. Signing contractual stuff. We chatted and it seemed the older guy had never seen the show. He was mostly there to try and promote his book. Anyway, everyone was friendly there and we all had this, oh crap, this is happening feeling. The rest is a bit of a blur and a bit boring. Long story short, I got voted out first. Problem is, most of us were in our mid-20s and the woman said she wanted an older bloke. Some people who got kicked off were upset because they felt they were set up to fail. Turns out the woman initially did say that she was into anyone during her audition but changed her mind during/before the show. Also, during my interview after the show, it had to be stopped because the camera was picking up shouting from Jeremy Kyle. I went home, saw an episode of Jeremy Kyle and the camera went backstage and I recognized the hallway as I'd also been there. And then a day later they asked if I wanted to come back for one last day as a reserve. Of course I said yes. So once again I returned to Manchester fully paid for. Previously, whilst being a reserve, I was with people of the same gender. However, this time, there were real-life women there. Some got changed in front of us and said, "You're gonna see me naked on TV anyway," which is fair enough. After the show, though, we went to the hotel bar and all of the groups mixed. We got pretty drunk, a few went out to town, and I think 2 of the applicants slept together. I remember one of the girls that won asked me to walk her to her room. I thought, best case scenario, I get laid. Worst case scenario, I get murdered. Weighing up the pros and cons. I walked her to her room, but there was an issue with the key, so she also got changed in front of me in the middle of the hallway, and we both returned to the bar. Unfortunately, I did not get laid or killed. I still have a few of the participants on Facebook, but we don't talk. I messaged one of them a few months ago because someone sent me a TikTok from Naked Attraction and I knew the girl in the clip. More stuff happened, but this is getting long and I meant to be working, so just feel free to ask any questions. Well, we can't ask questions and there's no edit, so that sucks. But this does seem like a pretty comprehensive overview of what it's like to be on one of these shows. £75 per day? Not great, but runners for food and drink, all expenses paid for, I guess it's not that bad. Story 14. My brother was a production assistant on some show that was produced somewhere in Southern California. The whole premise was a guy and a girl who used to be a couple but are now respectively seeing other people are placed in a room or a situation where they have to be near each other for a period of time. Cameras are rolling, capturing the interaction. Let's call these people persons A and B. The new significant others who don't know each other are placed in their own room and there's cameras rolling, capturing their interaction. Let's call these people C and D. The twist is there is a red light in the room of persons C and D. The red light was to illuminate whenever there was physical contact between persons A and B. One of my brother's jobs was to push the button that turns on the red light. In one particular episode, persons A and B were not doing anything that should have bothered persons C and D, and thus not making for good television. This caused the producer or director or whoever to tell my brother to push the button on numerous occasions. He protested but ultimately did what he was told. One of my brother's other jobs was to drive them back to the LA area when shooting was done. Well, couple AC was having quite the argument. The girl, C, accusing her boyfriend A of physical contact with an ex-girlfriend, B. Guy A denied all of it, naturally. Well, my brother couldn't take it anymore and he spilled the beans and told the whole van full of people how the director had instructed him to push the button, even though there was no physical contact. Story 15. I can actually answer this one. I was on first dates last September. Because we were still in pandemic mode, the show was filmed in Manchester. They sent a cab round to pick me up and had a hotel set up for us. They also set up a testing station in the hotel, which was convenient. They told me the date was at 7, but I actually ended up in a waiting room till about 10 for the actual date to start. Had to do the walk up to the restaurant twice and was waiting outside with no jacket, which was annoying. They'd also told me that I couldn't wear a white shirt, something to do with the cameras and lighting, so had to go with a backup outfit. The producers definitely tried to stitch me up though. When I went to the bar, the girl who I was talking to wasn't actually my date. It was her sister who was in the bathroom. But I had no idea initially, so I was chatting up the wrong girl. Yikes. During the date, I didn't notice the cameras until we were leaving, and saw some of them on a small discreet tripod. After the date, we had to hang around for another hour and a half for a photo shoot and the post-date interviews. Then they did the filming for the taxi and dropped us off at one of our hotels. All worth it in the end, as my date ended up my girlfriend. This has to be the only story here about the guy actually getting together with someone. That seems crazy lucky. Also, is it just me or are all the different stories about first date really, really different? Like there was that one from earlier that was like, you don't get dropped off at your place, but then this one said they do drop you off? I guess with different locations, it just varies wildly. I don't know.